Pressure doesn't show up in your life to crush you. It shows up to announce you. When the weight feels heavier than usual, when the days stretch longer and the nights grow louder, when your prayers feel like echoes instead of answers, that is often the moment heaven is closest to releasing something massive. Before God gives you something big, he rearranges the atmosphere around you. He shifts your inner world. He allows signs to surface, not to confuse you, but to prepare you. And if you know how to read them, you'll realize you are not being delayed. You are being positioned. There is a reason the struggle intensifies right before the breakthrough. Nothing extraordinary arrives in ordinary seasons. Great doors are not opened casually. They are unlocked through transformation. When God is about to entrust you with more influence, more purpose, more responsibility, he first reshapes the vessel. The signs are subtle, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes misunderstood, but they are consistent. And once you see them, you can stop resisting the process and start cooperating with it. Pressure is rarely interpreted correctly. Most people assume that when life becomes heavy, when responsibilities multiply, when emotions feel stretched thin, something must be wrong. But pressure, in the language of God, is not an enemy. It is a signal. It announces that preparation is underway. Nothing fragile is placed under great weight, and nothing insignificant attracts intense shaping. When God intends to entrust you with something greater, he first increases your capacity to carry it. Pressure does not appear to destroy you. It appears to strengthen the structure of your faith, your endurance, and your character. Consider how strength is built in the natural world. Muscles do not grow in comfort. They grow when resistance is applied. The strain tears fibers, and through recovery, those fibers rebuild stronger than before. In the same way, spiritual and emotional strength is formed under pressure. God allows weight not to harm you, but to reveal what you are capable of becoming. The pressure you feel today is exposing hidden strength you did not know you possessed. It is awakening resilience that comfort could never produce. Pressure also brings clarity. When life is easy, priorities remain blurred. Distractions feel harmless, but under pressure, what truly matters rises to the surface. You begin to recognize what deserves your energy and what must be released. God uses pressure to strip away excess so that your focus sharpens. What once divided your attention no longer holds power. Your prayers become more honest. Your faith becomes more intentional. Your dependence on God deepens, not because you are weak, but because you are being refined. Many people misread pressure as punishment, assuming they have failed or disappointed God, but punishment produces fear, while preparation produces growth. Pressure pushes you to mature. It forces you to develop patience, humility, and perseverance. These qualities cannot be downloaded instantly. They are cultivated through endurance. God does not rush this process because shortcuts create fragility. What he is preparing you to receive requires stability, not haste. Pressure also exposes identity. When external support is limited and circumstances feel overwhelming, the question arises, who are you when comfort is removed? God allows pressure to detach you from false identities built on success, approval, or ease. He teaches you to stand firmly in who you are in him, not in what surrounds you. This internal grounding becomes essential for the next season, because what is coming will demand confidence that is not shaken by circumstance. Under pressure, faith shifts from theory to practice. It is easy to trust God when outcomes are predictable, but when uncertainty dominates, faith becomes a choice, not a feeling. God allows pressure to train you to trust him without guarantees. This kind of trust is powerful. It is not emotional faith, but disciplined faith. It is faith that remains steady even when answers are delayed. Such faith is necessary for carrying greater responsibility without losing peace. Pressure also teaches discernment. When life intensifies, you learn to listen more carefully. You become sensitive to God's direction because every decision feels weightier. This attentiveness is not accidental. God sharpens your spiritual awareness so you can navigate future challenges wisely. What feels overwhelming now is actually training your ability to hear clearly and respond correctly later. There is also a humbling effect to pressure. It reminds you that strength does not come from control, but from surrender. You realize how limited your own understanding is and how essential God's guidance becomes. This humility protects you from pride in seasons of success. God knows that elevation without humility leads to collapse. Pressure anchors your heart in gratitude and dependence, ensuring that when blessing arrives, it does not replace God in your life. Pressure reveals commitment. When circumstances are favorable, anyone can remain faithful. But under weight, true devotion is revealed. God uses pressure to separate temporary passion from lasting obedience. He strengthens your resolve, teaching you to remain steady even when emotions fluctuate. This depth of commitment becomes the foundation upon which greater calling is built. If you are under pressure now, do not assume you're failing. Do not interpret the weight as a sign to retreat. Instead, recognize it as evidence that God trusts you enough to prepare you. The pressure is shaping you, aligning you, strengthening you. What feels heavy today will become the support structure for tomorrow's breakthrough. When the moment arrives and God releases what he has been preparing, you will realize the pressure was never meant to crush you. It was meant to announce you, strengthen you, and prove that you were ready to carry something greater. Discomfort is often misunderstood as failure or ingratitude, but in the hands of God, discomfort is one of the clearest signals that growth is about to occur. When the familiar begins to feel restrictive, when routines that once brought comfort now feel empty, it is not because something is broken, but because something is expanding within you. God allows dissatisfaction to surface, not to make you restless, but to make you ready. Comfort keeps people stationary, but discomfort creates movement. There comes a moment when what once felt like home starts to feel too small. The environment hasn't changed, but you have. Your spirit's grown beyond the boundaries that once defined you. God stirs this inner tension intentionally. If he left you completely satisfied where you are, you would never step into what he has prepared next. Discomfort is the holy nudge that prevents stagnation and pushes you toward transformation. This kind of discomfort does not scream, it whispers. It shows up as a quiet unease, a sense that something more is required of you. You may find yourself questioning habits you once accepted, conversations you once enjoyed, or goals that once motivated you. These questions are not signs of confusion, they are signs of awakening. God is refining your desires so they align with a higher purpose. He is shifting your appetite from what is easy to what is meaningful. Discomfort also exposes attachment. When God begins to move you forward, the first thing he reveals is what you are holding on to too tightly. Familiar spaces, predictable outcomes, and known identities feel safe even when they are no longer fruitful. God challenges these attachments because what he is about to give you cannot coexist with clinging to the past. You cannot carry new vision with old limitations. Discomfort loosens your grip so your hands are free to receive what is next. There is also a fear that accompanies this stage. The familiar may feel limiting, but it is known. The future, though promising, is uncertain. God allows discomfort to grow strong enough that staying becomes more uncomfortable than leaving. This is not cruelty, it is mercy. If the pain of remaining the same outweighs the fear of change, growth becomes inevitable. God uses discomfort to realign your courage with your calling. In this season, God teaches discernment between comfort and peace. Comfort is about familiarity and control, but peace is about alignment and trust. You may lose comfort, but you gain clarity. You may lose ease, but you gain direction. God removes the false security of routine so you can experience the deeper security of obedience. What feels unsettling is actually God recalibrating your inner compass. Discomfort also awakens hunger. You begin to seek more depth in your faith, more meaning in your work, more authenticity in your relationships. Surface level satisfaction no longer fulfills you. This hunger is not dissatisfaction with life. It is desire for purpose. God uses discomfort to stretch your vision beyond survival into significance. You stop asking how to stay safe and start asking how to be effective. If you are experiencing discomfort now, do not silence it. Listen to what it is revealing. It's not trying to take something from you. He is trying to lead you somewhere. What feels uncomfortable today is the doorway to tomorrow's growth. The familiar may be fading, but it is only because God is preparing you for something that requires more room, more faith, and more courage than where you have been. Loss often feels like punishment, especially when it arrives without explanation, when people drift away, when doors close unexpectedly, when opportunities you prayed for disappear. The natural response is to question what went wrong, but in God's process, removal is rarely rejection. It is redirection. Pruning is one of the clearest signs that promotion is coming, even though it never feels that way in the moment. God cuts back, not because something is unhealthy, but because something is valuable enough to refine. Pruning hurts because it involves things that once mattered. God does not prune what is dead. He prunes what is alive and fruitful. When something is removed from your life, it is not evidence that it had no purpose, but that its purpose for this season has ended. Holding on to what has already fulfilled its assignment will only limit what God wants to grow next. Pruning is God's way of protecting future fruit by reducing present distraction. This process often feels personal. Relationships change, support lessens, familiar voices grow quiet. You may feel exposed, vulnerable, and misunderstood, but God knows that what you are stepping into requires focus, not familiarity. Too many attachments can dilute vision. Too many options can weaken commitment. By simplifying your environment, God sharpens your direction. What feels like loss is actually concentration. Pruning also reveals dependency. When resources are reduced and people are removed, you discover where your trust truly rests. God allows this, so your faith does not remain tied to systems, connections, or comfort. He draws you closer to himself by stripping away substitutes. This deeper reliance is not meant to make you feel helpless, but to make you strong in the right source. What God is about to give you must be sustained by his strength, not external support. There is a refinement of motive that happens during pruning. When recognition fades and rewards disappear, you are forced to confront why you do what you do. God uses this moment to purify intention. You learn to serve without applause, to remain faithful without visibility, to obey without affirmation. This purification is essential because future promotion will attract attention, and if your heart is not anchored, that attention can become a trap rather than a testimony. Pruning also creates room for growth. Crowded branches may look full, but they prevent proper development. God removes what competes for space so that what remains can thrive. He clears emotional, spiritual, and mental clutter to allow deeper roots and stronger fruit. The emptiness you feel is not absence, it is availability. God does not waste space. What he removes, he intends to replace with something more aligned. It is important to understand that pruning is seasonal. God does not keep cutting endlessly. There is a time of removal followed by a time of increase. But increase only comes after obedience to the cutting. Resisting pruning prolongs pain, while surrender accelerates growth. When you trust God with what he removes, you make room for what he restores in greater measure. If you are in a season where things feel stripped back, do not panic. Do not rush to replace what God has removed. Sit in the simplicity. Let the focus deepen. Let the roots strengthen. What feels like less right now is actually preparation for more. Pruning is not God stepping away from you. It is God investing in you. And when growth begins, you will realize the removal was not a setback. It was the pathway to expansion. There are seasons when life becomes quiet in an unfamiliar way, not silent because nothing is happening, but silent because God is doing something deep. You may still be surrounded by people, yet feel internally separated. Conversations feel different. Connections don't carry the same weight. You sense that you no longer fit in spaces that once felt natural. This is not rejection. It is separation with purpose. Isolation, when guided by God, is not loneliness. It is incubation. God often withdraws you from noise before he releases you into influence. What he is forming within you cannot be shaped in constant distraction. Isolation creates an environment where distractions fade and focus sharpens. Without the constant opinions of others, you begin to hear God's voice more clearly. Decisions become less about approval and more about obedience. God uses this quiet to teach you discernment, depth, and spiritual sensitivity that crowds cannot provide. This season can feel uncomfortable because human nature craves connection. We draw identity and affirmation from relationships, routines, and shared experiences. When those are reduced, insecurity often rises. But God allows this exposure so you learn to draw security from Him alone. He wants your identity anchored in truth, not in validation. What you are about to carry will require inner strength. And inner strength is built when external support is limited. Isolation also reveals who you are without applause. When recognition fades, you are confronted with the question of faithfulness. Will you remain obedient when no one sees? Will you continue to trust when encouragement is scarce? God allows this season to mature your character. Visibility tests gifting, but invisibility tests faith. If you can remain faithful in the hidden place, you will be steady when attention returns. In isolation, God confronts patterns that were easy to ignore in busier seasons. Without distraction, habits, fears, and wounds surface. This is not exposure for shame, but for healing. God brings what is buried into the light so it no longer controls your future. Healing requires space, and isolation provides that space. What feels uncomfortable is actually God restoring wholeness before expansion. This season also strengthens spiritual authority. Authority is not produced by crowds, it is produced by intimacy. Time alone with God deepens trust and sharpens obedience. You learn to follow His direction without needing confirmation from others. This confidence becomes essential later, when obedience may be misunderstood. God trains you to stand firm even when you stand alone. Isolation teaches patience. Without constant movement or affirmation, you learn to wait well. Waiting is not inactivity, it is preparation. God aligns your timing with His purpose, teaching you not to rush ahead or lag behind. This patience protects you from premature exposure. What grows too fast often collapses under its own weight. God slows you down so your foundation can support what is coming. If you find yourself in a season of isolation, resist the urge to force connection or escape the quiet. God has not forgotten you. He has set you apart. This season is not empty. It is intentional. What He's forming now will sustain you later. Isolation is not the absence of purpose. It is the birthplace of destiny. There are moments when life seems to push back just as you decide to move forward. You commit to trusting God more deeply, and suddenly resistance intensifies. Doubts grow louder, old fears resurface, and challenges appear where there were none before. This is not coincidence, and it is not failure. Increased opposition is often the clearest confirmation that progress is being made. Resistance does not rise against what is stagnant. It rises against what is advancing. Opposition has a way of making you question your direction. You begin to wonder if you misheard God or stepped out too soon, but the presence of resistance does not mean you are on the wrong path. Often, it means you are on the right one. Darkness does not fight emptiness. It responds to threat. When God is moving you closer to what He has prepared, opposition becomes urgent because time is short. What you feel as attack is actually evidence of momentum. This season tests discernment. Not every challenge is meant to stop you. Some are meant to strengthen you. God allows opposition to refine your response. Will you retreat or will you stand? Will you react in fear or will you respond in faith? The way you handle resistance determines how prepared you are for what lies ahead. God uses opposition to reveal whether your confidence is rooted in circumstances or anchored in Him. Opposition also exposes spiritual maturity. It is easy to trust God when doors open smoothly, but faith is proven when resistance appears. God allows this testing not to break you, but to build endurance. Endurance produces stability, and stability is essential for sustaining long-term purpose. What you are stepping into is not a moment, it is a season. Without endurance, even a blessing can become overwhelming. Increased opposition often brings intensified temptation. Old patterns try to resurface, not because they have power, but because they are familiar. The enemy attempts to pull you back into cycles that limit growth. God allows this confrontation so you can recognize your progress. What once controlled you now only attempts to distract you. Each time you resist, your authority strengthens and your confidence grows. This resistance also deepens your prayer. When challenges multiply, surface-level faith is no longer sufficient. You are driven into deeper dependence on God. Your prayers become more honest, more focused, more intentional. Opposition sharpens spiritual awareness. You learn to fight with wisdom instead of emotion, with faith instead of fear. This depth becomes essential for the next level of responsibility. Opposition also clarifies vision. When pressure increases, distractions lose their appeal. You become more focused on what truly matters. God uses resistance to refine your priorities and strengthen your resolve. What once felt optional now feels essential. This clarity prepares you to lead, to influence, and to carry greater weight without losing direction. If you are facing opposition now, do not interpret it as a sign to stop. Interpret it as confirmation that movement is happening. Stay grounded, stay faithful, stand firm. What resists you now cannot stop what God has ordained. Opposition may slow the pace, but it cannot cancel the promise. And when you break through, you will realize the resistance did not weaken you. It proved you were ready to move forward. There comes a point in the journey where trust is no longer theoretical. It is no longer built on what you understand, but on who you believe God to be. This is the stage where faith is stretched, not gently, but deliberately. Circumstances arise that logic cannot solve. Plans fall short, certainty fades. God allows this stretching because what he is preparing to release requires a faith that can stand without visible support. Small blessings can rest on small faith, but greater purpose demands deeper trust. When faith is stretched, comfort zones disappear. You are placed in situations where reliance on your own strength is no longer sufficient. This exposure is intentional. God is teaching you to lean on him in ways you never had to be. 4, the stretching is uncomfortable because growth always is. Muscles ache when they expand, but that ache signals progress, not injury. In the same way, spiritual discomfort signals that your capacity for trust is increasing. This stretching often feels like waiting without clarity. You may know God has spoken, but the fulfillment feels distant. Doubt whispers questions, and impatience tries to take control. God allows this tension so faith becomes disciplined rather than emotional. Faith rooted in emotion fades when feelings change, but faith grounded in conviction remains steady. God is building a trust that does not depend on immediate results. As faith stretches, your prayer life changes. You stop praying only for outcomes and begin praying for alignment. You ask less for explanations and more for endurance. This shift is powerful. It means you trust God's character more than your circumstances. This level of faith allows God to work freely because you are no longer trying to control the process. Surrender replaces striving, and peace begins to grow even before answers arrive. Stretching faith also requires release. God often asks you to let go of backup plans, self-made security, and familiar safety nets. This is not because those things are evil, but because they can limit trust. When alternatives remain, faith is divided. God stretches faith by narrowing options until trust becomes the only path forward. This focused reliance strengthens spiritual confidence and sharpens obedience. In this season, God also reveals the difference between belief and trust. Belief acknowledges that God can act, but trust rests in the assurance that he will act in his timing and his way. Trust does not demand speed. It requires faithfulness. This distinction prepares you to carry greater responsibility without anxiety. What God is about to give you will require patience as M. Passion. Stretching faith builds spiritual resilience. You learn to remain hopeful without becoming desperate, to stay confident without becoming rigid. This balance is essential. God is not only concerned with what you receive, but with who you become in the process. A stretched faith produces stability, and stability allows blessing to grow without overwhelming you. If your faith feels tested right now, do not interpret it as weakness. It is evidence of development. God is expanding your trust because what is coming requires more than surface level belief. Stay steady, stay open. The stretching is preparing you to carry something greater with confidence, humility, and unwavering trust. There are moments when God calls you to move without giving you the full picture. He speaks direction without detail, instruction without explanation. This is often one of the most challenging stages because the human mind craves clarity and certainty. We want to understand the outcome before we commit to the process. But when God is preparing you for something greater, he trains you to trust his voice more than your understanding. Obedience without explanation is not confusion, it is refinement. God knows that if he revealed everything at once, fear or pride could interfere. Too much information can overwhelm or inflate, so he gives enough light for the next step, not the entire journey. This develops spiritual attentiveness. You learn to listen closely, not for full plans, but for present instruction. Each step of obedience strengthens confidence in his guidance. Trust becomes experiential, not theoretical. This kind of obedience confronts control. It forces you to release the need to manage outcomes. You may not know where a decision will lead, but you choose to obey because you know who is leading. This surrender is powerful. It shifts authority from your logic to God's wisdom. What he is about to give you requires the ability to move without needing approval or understanding from others. Obedience without explanation also exposes motives. When God's instruction lacks visible reward, you are confronted with why you obey. Is it for recognition, security, or faithfulness? God uses this stage to purify intention. You learn to obey because he is trustworthy, not because obedience is convenient. This depth of commitment prepares you for greater responsibility, where obedience may be misunderstood or even opposed in this season. Obedience becomes a language of trust. Each act of obedience builds spiritual authority. Authority is not granted by position. It is formed through consistent submission to God's will. When you obey in uncertainty, you develop inner confidence that does not rely on external validation. This strength becomes essential when you step into leadership or influence. Obedience without explanation also teaches patience. You may not see immediate results, but obedience is never wasted. God works in unseen ways. What appears insignificant now may be laying foundations you cannot yet recognize. Trusting God's timing protects you from discouragement and impulsive decisions. You learn to measure progress by faithfulness rather than speed. This stage also deepens humility. You realize that your understanding is limited and that God's perspective is broader. Humility keeps your heart teachable. God can guide those who are willing to follow, even when they do not fully understand. This openness allows God to adjust your path without resistance. If God is asking you to obey without explanation right now, do not hesitate. Obedience in uncertainty is training for clarity later. What you are practicing now will sustain you when responsibility increases. Trust the voice that is leading you. The direction may not yet make sense, but the destination is already secured. Before God enlarges influence, he refines character. This order is intentional and protective. Expansion without integrity is dangerous because it exposes what has not been healed or disciplined. When God begins to deal with areas of compromise, attitude, and hidden behavior, it is not restriction, it is preparation. Holiness is not about perfection, it is about alignment. God raises the standard of your life before he raises the platform of your calling. In this season, sensitivity increases. Things that once felt normal begin to feel heavy. Words, habits, and choices are examined more closely. This is not condemnation, but conviction. Conviction is evidence of God's nearness. It protects you from drifting into patterns that could sabotage your future. God corrects privately, so he does not have to expose publicly. What feels uncomfortable now is actually safeguarding what is coming. Integrity becomes central during this stage. God teaches you to value consistency over image. Who you are when no one is watching matters more than how you appear when everyone is watching. This internal alignment creates strength. When your private life matches your public confession, confidence grows naturally. You no longer need to manage appearances because your foundation is secure. God also addresses motives during this refinement. He reveals why you desire growth, success, or recognition. If ambition is rooted in validation rather than purpose, it becomes unstable. God reshapes ambition into stewardship. He teaches you that influence is not ownership, it is responsibility. This shift prepares you to carry expansion without ego. What God gives is meant to be managed, not possessed. Discipline plays a vital role in this season. God introduces boundaries, not to limit joy, but to preserve freedom. Discipline sharpens focus and protects energy. It trains you to say no to what is permissible so you can say yes to what is purposeful. This self-control becomes essential later when options increase and distractions multiply. Refinement also involves forgiveness and inner healing. God surfaces unresolved wounds, resentment, and bitterness, not to reopen pain, but to remove poison. Unhealed wounds distort perception and decision-making. God heals the inside so the outside can flourish. Expansion amplifies what exists within. If peace and integrity are present, they grow. If bitterness remains, it multiplies. God ensures the inside is whole before the outside expands. This stage can feel demanding because God's expectations seem higher. But higher standards are not heavier burdens. They are evidence of trust. God does not demand more from those he does not plan to use more. His refinement is an invitation into deeper responsibility, not a threat of rejection. If you feel God calling you to greater discipline and integrity, embrace it. He is not withholding blessing. He is preparing you to sustain it. Holiness is not the absence of joy. It is the foundation of lasting fulfillment. What God is refining now will protect what he is about to release. There is a moment when your focus quietly shifts away from yourself. Your prayers begin to change. What once centered on personal relief, answers, and breakthroughs slowly expands into concern for others. You find yourself thinking about needs that do not directly affect you, feeling compassion for struggles that are not your own, and carrying a weight that feels bigger than your personal story. This is not emotional sensitivity. It is purpose awakening. When God places a burden on your heart, it is often because he intends to work through your life in a greater way. This burden is not random. God does not burden people without intention. What he allows you to feel deeply is connected to what he is calling you to influence. The ache you carry points toward assignment. You may feel drawn to brokenness, injustice, pain, or lostness, not because you can fix it alone, but because God is aligning your heart with his. This alignment prepares you to become a vessel, not just a recipient of blessing. At first, this burden can feel overwhelming. You may wonder why certain issues affect you so deeply while others seem unaffected. But God often chooses burden before authority. He allows you to feel the weight so you will never treat the responsibility lightly. Compassion guards purpose from becoming performance. When your heart is moved, your actions become sincere. God shapes your motivation before he expands your impact. This shift also changes how you define success. Achievement alone no longer satisfies you. You desire significance, not applause. You begin to measure progress by lives touched rather than goals reached. This transformation is crucial because what God is about to give you is not meant to terminate in you. It is meant to flow through you. Blessing without purpose becomes indulgence, but blessing with purpose becomes legacy. God also uses this burden to stretch your faith. Caring deeply exposes limitations. You quickly realize you cannot carry this weight on your own. This drives you into deeper dependence on God. Prayer becomes more intercessory, less transactional. You stop asking only for personal favor and start asking for divine intervention. This shift deepens spiritual maturity and aligns your heart with heaven's priorities. The burden also clarifies direction. While many options may exist, the weight you feel points you toward where you are called to serve. Purpose becomes less about choice and more about obedience. You are drawn toward specific people, causes, or spaces. God uses this attraction to guide your steps. What moves your heart often reveals where your life will be most effective. This stage requires balance. A burden without boundaries can lead to burnout. God teaches you to carry responsibility with wisdom, not emotional exhaustion. You learn to trust him with outcomes while remaining faithful in action. This balance protects your health and ensures longevity and purpose. If you feel a burden rising within you, do not ignore it or suppress it. It is a sign that God is expanding your heart to match a greater assignment. What he's about to do through you will impact others far beyond what you can see now. The burden is not meant to crush you. It is meant to prepare you to carry purpose with compassion and strength. There comes a moment when everything around you may still look unsettled, yet something within you becomes calm. The storm has not stopped, the questions have not all been answered, and the path ahead may still be unclear, but fear no longer dominates your thoughts. This peace does not come from resolved circumstances, it comes from alignment. It is one of the clearest signs that God has settled something in your spirit. When peace appears in the middle of chaos, it is not denial, it is confirmation. This kind of peace cannot be manufactured. It is not positive thinking or emotional numbness. It is the result of trust that has been tested and strengthened. You have walked through pressure, pruning, isolation, opposition, and stretching faith. Along the way, anxiety has been confronted and fear has lost its authority. Peace emerges when you stop fighting for control and start resting in God's sovereignty. It signals that your heart is no longer arguing with his will. Peace also brings clarity. While chaos clouds judgment, peace sharpens perception. You begin to make decisions without panic, to respond instead of react. Emotional stability replaces impulsiveness. This clarity is essential because what God is about to release will require wisdom and steady leadership. Peace anchors you so success does not inflate you and challenges do not derail you. This internal calm is often misunderstood by others. People may wonder how you can remain composed when circumstances seem uncertain. But peace is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of confidence. You are no longer driven by urgency or fear of missing out. You trust God's timing. This patience protects you from premature action and unnecessary stress. Peace also guards obedience. When fear rules, obedience becomes conditional. But when peace reigns, obedience flows naturally. You no longer obey to secure outcomes. You obey because your heart is aligned. This freedom strengthens your relationship with God. You trust his direction without second-guessing every step. Peace keeps you steady as responsibility increases. There is also a deep sense of assurance that accompanies this peace. You may not know how everything will unfold, but you know who is in control. This assurance allows you to wait without frustration and move without hesitation. It keeps hope alive even when results are delayed. Peace does not remove desire, it removes desperation. This stage marks emotional maturity. You are no longer controlled by external conditions. Your inner world remains stable regardless of what happens around you. This stability is essential for sustaining long-term purpose. God does not release greater influence to unstable hearts. Peace proves that you can carry weight without losing balance. If you are experiencing peace in the middle of uncertainty, do not dismiss it. It is no. Passivity is preparation. God has aligned your heart with his plan. What he has promised is secure, and your spirit knows it. This peace is the final confirmation that you are ready. The chaos may still exist around you, but inside, something has settled. And that settlement is a sign that what God is about to do is near.